The sleepy town of Willow Creek had always been known for its manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, and a general sense of peace. Nothing much ever happened there, or so everyone thought. That illusion of tranquility shattered one Tuesday morning when Sarah Jenkins, a well-known figure in the local social circle, reported a shocking crime. "They took everything," she sobbed to the 911 operator, her voice trembling with distress. "All my jewelry, it's gone." The operator, used to dealing with minor fender benders and the occasional lost dog, immediately recognized the gravity in Sarah's voice. She dispatched officers to the scene, a sprawling two-story house on Oak Street, nestled amongst other equally impressive homes. News of the robbery spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. The local coffee shop buzzed with worried chatter. $100,000 worth of jewelry, exclaimed Mrs. Gable, a retired school teacher, her eyes wide with disbelief. Who would do such a thing? Mr. Peterson, a retired accountant, shook his head gravely. It just goes to show, you can't trust anyone these days. Not even in Willow Creek. The story dominated the local news. The headline screamed, "Willow Creek's peace shattered, prominent resident victim of jewelry heist." The article detailed Sarah's account of the incident, emphasizing the significant value of the stolen items, which included a diamond necklace passed down through generations, a ruby bracelet her husband had given her on their anniversary, and several other precious pieces. Sarah, a picture of grief and vulnerability, was interviewed by the local news reporter. "These weren't just pieces of jewelry," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "They were memories, family heirlooms. I'm devastated." The community rallied around Sarah, offering support and sympathy. Meals were delivered to her doorstep, flowers adorned her living room, and friends offered a comforting shoulder to cry on. Everyone in Willow Creek felt violated, as if their own homes had been invaded. The sense of security that had always defined their town was gone, replaced by fear and suspicion. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator with the Willow Creek Police Department, took charge of the case. He was known for his sharp mind, meticulous attention to detail, and unwavering determination. He understood the importance of solving this crime, not only to recover the stolen jewelry but also to restore the town's sense of security. As Detective Miller surveyed the scene, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The house was immaculate, almost too perfect. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no jimmied locks. It was as if the thief had simply walked in and taken the jewelry without a struggle. He began his investigation by interviewing Sarah, carefully documenting her every word. He asked her about her daily routine, her relationships, and any recent events that might be relevant to the case. Sarah cooperated fully, providing detailed answers to his questions, but Detective Miller couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was holding something back. The detective also interviewed neighbors, canvassing the area for any potential witnesses. However, no one had seen or heard anything unusual. The quiet, tree-lined street had been as peaceful as ever on the morning of the alleged robbery. As the investigation progressed, Detective Miller found himself facing a frustrating lack of leads. There were no fingerprints, no footprints, no witnesses, and no clear motive. The case was quickly turning into a perplexing mystery, one that threatened to unravel the very fabric of Willow Creek. The pressure to solve the crime mounted, and Detective Miller knew he had to dig deeper if he wanted to uncover the truth behind the missing jewelry. Detective Miller returned to the station, the image of Sarah's tear-streaked face still fresh in his mind. He reviewed the transcript of her 911 call and the notes from his initial interview. Something about her demeanor felt rehearsed, almost theatrical. He decided to delve deeper into Sarah's background, hoping to uncover any hidden motives or inconsistencies in her story. Meanwhile, back at the Jenkins residence, Sarah was putting on a show of her own. She appeared distraught, pacing back and forth, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She made sure the curtains were open, allowing concerned neighbors to witness her grief. She wanted everyone to believe she was the victim of a terrible crime. But behind closed doors, a different Sarah emerged. The tears dried up, her posture straightened, and a cold calculation replaced the feigned despair in her eyes. She moved with purpose, carefully removing a hidden panel in her closet. Inside, nestled amongst old photo albums and forgotten souvenirs, was a small, locked safe. Sarah retrieved a key from a jewelry box on her dresser and inserted it into the safe. With a click, the safe opened, revealing its contents, a stack of cash, several passports, and a small, velvet pouch. She opened the pouch and smiled grimly as she gazed at the glittering jewels inside. The jewels she claimed had been stolen. The next morning, Detective Miller arrived at the Willow Creek Public Library, determined to learn everything he could about Sarah Jenkins. He started by searching the online archives for news articles, property records, and any other publicly available information. He discovered that Sarah had been married to her husband, David, for 15 years. They seemed to have a perfect life, a beautiful home, successful careers, and a wide circle of friends. But as Detective Miller dug deeper, he uncovered cracks in the facade. He found records of several large loans Sarah had taken out in recent years, loans that were significantly higher than their reported income would suggest. He also discovered that their house was heavily mortgaged, and they were behind on their payments. It seemed that the Jenkins' seemingly perfect life was built on a foundation of debt. Detective Miller also learned that Sarah had a history of financial difficulties. Her parents had lost their home to foreclosure when she was a teenager, and she had struggled to make ends meet in her early 20s. It was possible that her past financial struggles had resurfaced, leading her to desperate measures. Meanwhile, Sarah was busy putting her plan into action. She contacted her insurance company, filing a detailed claim for the stolen jewelry. She provided them with a list of the missing items, along with their estimated values. She emphasized the sentimental value of the jewelry, hoping to tug at their heartstrings and expedite the claim. The insurance adjuster, a seasoned professional named Mr. Henderson, listened patiently to Sarah's story. He expressed his sympathy for her loss but also reminded her that the insurance company would conduct a thorough investigation before approving the claim. Mr. Henderson's words didn't faze Sarah. She was confident that she had covered her tracks and that the insurance company would have no reason to suspect foul play. She believed she was one step closer to solving her financial problems and securing her future. But she underestimated Detective Miller's determination and his unwavering pursuit of the truth. The detective was about to uncover the carefully constructed web of lies that Sarah had spun, revealing the shocking truth behind the missing jewelry. Back at the police station, Detective Miller reread Sarah's statement. Every detail, every pause, every sob was meticulously documented. I woke up around 7 a.m., the statement read. David had already left for work. I went downstairs to make coffee, and that's when I noticed it. The jewelry box on the living room table was empty. She described the jewelry box as a beautiful, antique wooden chest that had belonged to her grandmother. It was usually kept in her bedroom, but she had brought it downstairs the night before to admire the pieces before putting them away. I always loved looking at them, she had said, her voice cracking with emotion. They were so precious to me. She claimed that the jewelry box contained her entire collection, including the diamond necklace, the ruby bracelet, a pair of emerald earrings, and several other valuable items. She estimated the total value of the stolen jewelry at $100,000, but she insisted that their sentimental value was far greater. Detective Miller focused on the timeline. According to Sarah, the robbery must have occurred sometime between 11 p.m. the previous night, when she last saw the jewelry box, and 7 a.m. the following morning, when she discovered it was missing. He reviewed the police report from the scene. The officers had found no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and no evidence of a struggle. The house was locked and secured, just as Sarah had described. Detective Miller decided to revisit the Jenkins residence. He wanted to walk through the house again, paying close attention to every detail. He needed to see the scene with his own eyes, to feel the atmosphere, and to try to understand what had happened. He arrived at the house around midday. Sarah greeted him at the door, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She offered him a cup of coffee, but he politely declined. "I just want to take another look around, Mrs. Jenkins," he said. "If you don't mind." Sarah nodded and led him inside. He started in the living room, where the jewelry box had been discovered empty. He examined the table, looking for any signs of disturbance. He checked the windows and doors, making sure they were locked and secure. He then moved to the bedroom, where the jewelry box was usually kept. He looked around the room, paying close attention to the dresser, where Sarah kept her other jewelry. He noticed that some of the drawers were slightly ajar, as if someone had been rummaging through them. He asked Sarah about the drawers. She said that she had been looking for a particular pair of earrings that she wanted to wear to a memorial service for a friend who had recently passed away. Detective Miller continued his search, moving from room to room, carefully examining every detail. He found nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would suggest a break-in or a robbery. As he was about to leave, he noticed a small security camera mounted above the front door. He asked Sarah about the camera. "Oh, that," she said. "It's just a cheap little thing. It doesn't even work." Detective Miller raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that, Mrs. Jenkins?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. "Well," she said, "I haven't used it in a while. I don't even know if it's still recording." Detective Miller knew that he had to get his hands on that security footage. It was the only piece of evidence that could potentially crack the case. He asked Sarah if he could take the camera back to the station for analysis. Sarah seemed reluctant at first, but she eventually agreed. Detective Miller carefully removed the camera and placed it in an evidence bag. He knew that this could be the break he had been waiting for. The truth, he suspected, was hidden within the digital files of that small, seemingly insignificant security camera. Back at the police station, the tech team immediately got to work on the security camera. Detective Miller watched anxiously as they connected it to their system. The camera was old and outdated, but with a little bit of technical wizardry, they were able to retrieve the footage. The first few hours of footage were uneventful, showing only the occasional car driving by and a few squirrels scampering across the lawn. Detective Miller started to lose hope, wondering if Sarah was telling the truth about the camera not working. But then, around 10 p.m., something caught his eye. A figure emerged from the front door of the Jenkins residence. It was Sarah, dressed in a dark hoodie and gloves. She looked around cautiously, as if making sure no one was watching. She walked to the side of the house and disappeared from view. A few minutes later, she reappeared, carrying a large bag. She struggled with the bag for a moment, then managed to hoist it into the trunk of her car. Detective Miller leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Sarah was staging her own robbery. He watched as she drove away, then returned a few hours later, empty-handed. She went back inside the house, and the footage ended shortly after that. Detective Miller was stunned. He had suspected that Sarah was hiding something, but he never imagined that she would go to such lengths to deceive the police and the insurance company. He immediately called Mr. Henderson, the insurance adjuster, and told him about the security footage. Mr. Henderson was equally shocked. He thanked Detective Miller for his diligence and promised to launch his own investigation into Sarah's claim. Meanwhile, Detective Miller gathered his team and prepared to confront Sarah. He knew that she would deny everything, but he had the evidence to prove her guilt. He was determined to bring her to justice and to restore the peace of mind to the residents of Willow Creek. He arrived at the Jenkins residence early the next morning. Sarah answered the door, looking surprised to see him. "What's this about, detective?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to ask you a few more questions, Mrs. Jenkins," he said. "Can we come in?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly stepped aside. Detective Miller and his team entered the house. "We know that you staged the robbery, Mrs. Jenkins," Detective Miller said, his voice firm. "We have the security footage to prove it." Sarah's face paled. She tried to deny it, but Detective Miller cut her off. "We saw you, Mrs. Jenkins," he said. We saw you leaving the house with the jewelry. We know what you did." Sarah broke down in tears. She confessed everything, admitting that she had been struggling with financial problems and that she had seen the insurance claim as a way out. Detective Miller arrested Sarah and charged her with insurance fraud and filing a false police report. The news of her arrest sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. The residents were stunned that someone they had trusted could be capable of such deception. The case of Sarah Jenkins became a cautionary tale, a reminder that things are not always as they seem and that even in the most peaceful of communities, darkness can lurk beneath the surface. But thanks to Detective Miller's unwavering determination, the truth had prevailed, and justice had been served. Despite Sarah's confession and arrest, Detective Miller couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. He understood her motive, the desperate need for money, but he couldn't quite grasp why she had chosen such an elaborate and risky scheme. Why not sell the jewelry outright? Why go through the charade of a staged robbery? He decided to visit Sarah in jail. He needed to understand her thought process, to get a clearer picture of her motivations. "Why didn't you just sell the jewelry, Sarah?" he asked, his voice calm and neutral. "It would have been a lot less risky than staging a robbery." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and defiance. "I couldn't," she said. "Those pieces were family heirlooms. They meant something to me." Detective Miller raised an eyebrow. "But you were willing to lie to the police, deceive your friends and neighbors, and risk going to jail for them?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. "I know it sounds crazy," she said. "But I thought I could get away with it. I thought I was smarter than everyone else." She explained that she had initially considered selling the jewelry, but she couldn't bring herself to part with it. It was too sentimental, too much a part of her family history. But she was desperate for money, and the insurance claim seemed like the perfect solution. "I thought I could have my cake and eat it too," she said. "I could keep the jewelry and get the money." Detective Miller asked her about the security camera. "Why did you tell me it didn't work?" Sarah shrugged. "I panicked," she said. "I didn't want you to see the footage." She admitted that she had known the camera was working, but she had hoped that Detective Miller wouldn't bother to check it. She had underestimated his intelligence and his determination. Detective Miller spent several hours talking to Sarah, trying to understand her motivations and her state of mind. He learned that she was a complex and troubled woman, driven by a combination of desperation, greed, and a misguided sense of entitlement. He also learned that she wasn't entirely alone in her scheme. She had confided in a friend, a woman named Emily, who had helped her plan the robbery and dispose of the jewelry. Detective Miller immediately launched an investigation into Emily's involvement. He interviewed her, and she eventually confessed to her role in the crime. She told him that Sarah had convinced her that it was a victimless crime and that no one would get hurt. Emily's confession provided Detective Miller with the final piece of the puzzle. He now had a complete understanding of the crime, from its inception to its execution. He had brought Sarah and her accomplice to justice, and he had restored the peace of mind to the residents of Willow Creek. As he closed the case, Detective Miller couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. He had seen the dark side of human nature, the lengths to which people would go for money and the devastating consequences of their actions. But he also knew that his work was important, that he had a duty to protect the innocent and to bring the guilty to justice. And in the case of Sarah Jenkins, he had done just that. Even after Emily's confession, Detective Miller knew there was still more work to be done. He needed to recover the jewelry, not only to return it to its rightful owner, or, in this case, the insurance company, but also to ensure that Sarah and Emily couldn't profit from their crime. He pressed Emily for information about the location of the jewelry. She revealed that she had hidden the bag containing the jewels in an abandoned well on her family's property, a dilapidated farm on the outskirts of Willow Creek. Detective Miller and his team drove to the farm, a desolate and overgrown landscape. The well was old and crumbling, covered in moss and surrounded by weeds. It looked like it hadn't been used in decades. They carefully lowered a rope into the well and began to search for the bag. After several hours of searching, they finally found it, submerged in the murky water at the bottom of the well. The bag was heavy and waterlogged, but Detective Miller could feel the familiar shape of the jewelry box inside. He carefully hauled the bag out of the well and opened it. Inside, he found the antique wooden chest, just as Sarah had described. He opened the chest and gazed at the glittering jewels inside. The diamond necklace, the ruby bracelet, the emerald earrings, they were all there, just as Sarah had claimed. Detective Miller felt a sense of satisfaction. He had recovered the stolen jewelry, and he had brought Sarah and Emily to justice. But he also felt a sense of sadness, knowing that their actions had shattered the peace and tranquility of Willow Creek. He returned to the police station, where he prepared the jewelry for evidence processing. He carefully photographed each piece, documenting its condition and its value. He then contacted Mr. Henderson, the insurance adjuster, and informed him that the jewelry had been recovered. Mr. Henderson was overjoyed. He thanked Detective Miller for his exceptional work and promised to reimburse the insurance company for the cost of the investigation. Detective Miller then turned his attention to the security footage from Sarah's neighbors. He had initially dismissed this as a long shot, but he decided to give it one last try. He visited each of Sarah's neighbors, asking them if they had any security cameras and if they would be willing to share the footage with him. Most of the neighbors were hesitant at first, but they eventually agreed, impressed by Detective Miller's professionalism and his dedication to solving the case. Detective Miller spent hours reviewing the security footage from the neighbors' cameras. He was looking for anything that might shed light on the events of the night of the robbery. And then, he found something. One of Sarah's neighbors had a security camera that faced the street. The footage showed Sarah's car leaving her house around 10 p.m. on the night of the robbery. But it also showed something else. A few minutes later, a second car pulled up to Sarah's house. A woman got out of the car and went inside. Detective Miller recognized the woman as Emily, Sarah's accomplice. The footage showed Emily leaving Sarah's house a few hours later, carrying a large bag. It was clear that she was helping Sarah stage the robbery. Detective Miller had found the final piece of evidence he needed. He now had irrefutable proof of Sarah and Emily's guilt. He closed the case with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that he had done everything in his power to bring justice to Willow Creek. The community could finally start to heal, knowing that the truth had been revealed and that the guilty had been brought to account. With the case officially closed, Detective Miller found himself reflecting on the events that had unfolded in Willow Creek. He thought about Sarah Jenkins, a woman who had seemingly had it all, but who had thrown it away for greed and desperation. He wondered what would become of her, and of Emily, as they faced the consequences of their actions. He also thought about the impact the case had had on the community. The residents of Willow Creek had been shaken by the revelation that one of their own was capable of such deception. The sense of trust and security that had once defined their town had been shattered. But Detective Miller also knew that the community would heal. The truth had been revealed, and the guilty had been brought to justice. The residents of Willow Creek were resilient, and they would find a way to rebuild their sense of trust and security. A few weeks later, Detective Miller received a letter from the Willow Creek Community Association. The letter thanked him for his service to the town and invited him to be the guest of honor at their annual town picnic. Detective Miller was touched by the invitation. He knew that his work had made a difference in the lives of the residents of Willow Creek, and he was grateful for their recognition. He attended the town picnic, where he was greeted warmly by the residents. They thanked him for his dedication and his unwavering pursuit of the truth. They told him that his work had helped them to feel safe and secure again. Detective Miller felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. He knew that he had made a positive impact on the community, and that his work had helped to restore their faith in justice. As he mingled with the residents of Willow Creek, he couldn't help but notice a sense of optimism and renewal in the air. The town was healing, and the community was stronger than ever. The case of Sarah Jenkins had been a difficult and challenging one, but it had also been a reminder of the importance of truth, justice, and community. Detective Miller knew that he would never forget the events that had unfolded in Willow Creek, and he was grateful for the opportunity to have served the town and its residents. In the end, the story of Sarah Jenkins served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that even in the most peaceful of communities, darkness can lurk beneath the surface. But it was also a story of hope, a reminder that truth and justice will always prevail, and that even the most shattered communities can heal and rebuild. And it was a story about the importance of a good detective, whose sharp mind and unwavering determination brought light to the darkness and restored peace to a troubled town. Detective Miller, forever a hero in the eyes of Willow Creek, continued his work, knowing that his dedication could make a real difference in the lives of others. The quiet town, once shaken, slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm, forever changed but ultimately stronger. Detective Miller and his partner, Detective Johnson, sat across from Sarah in the small, sterile interrogation room. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Sarah fidgeted nervously, avoiding eye contact. She seemed to sense that the game was up. Detective Miller placed a laptop on the table and opened it, displaying the security footage from Sarah's own camera. He pressed play. Sarah watched in stunned silence as the video showed her, dressed in dark clothing, carefully hiding her jewelry in various locations around her house. She placed the diamond necklace behind a stack of books on the bookshelf. She tucked the ruby bracelet inside a flower pot on the windowsill. She stuffed the emerald earrings under the cushions of the sofa. The video then showed her rummaging through the jewelry box, making it look as though someone had ransacked it. She scattered a few of her other belongings around the room, creating the illusion of a forced entry. As the video played, Sarah's face grew paler and paler. Her eyes darted back and forth, searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to run. The evidence was irrefutable. When the video ended, Detective Miller turned to Sarah, his expression stern. "Care to explain this, Mrs. Jenkins?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Sarah remained silent for a moment, her mind racing. She knew that she had been caught red-handed. There was no point in denying it any longer. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm all ears," Detective Miller replied, leaning forward expectantly. Sarah took a deep breath and began to confess. She told Detective Miller about her financial problems, her gambling addiction, and her desperate need for money. She explained that she had initially considered selling the jewelry, but she couldn't bring herself to part with it. "It was stupid, I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate." Detective Miller listened patiently as Sarah poured out her heart. He understood her desperation, but he couldn't condone her actions. She had broken the law, and she had betrayed the trust of her community. When Sarah finished her confession, Detective Miller asked her about Emily's involvement. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then admitted that Emily had helped her plan the robbery and dispose of the jewelry. Detective Miller thanked Sarah for her honesty and informed her that she was being charged with insurance fraud and filing a false police report. He also informed her that Emily would be facing charges as well. Sarah nodded meekly, accepting her fate. She knew that she had made a terrible mistake, and she was prepared to face the consequences. As Detective Miller led Sarah out of the interrogation room, he couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. He had hoped that Sarah would be able to explain her actions in a way that would make sense, but her confession had only confirmed his worst suspicions. She had been driven by greed and desperation, and she had been willing to do anything to get what she wanted. The case of Sarah Jenkins was a reminder that even in the most peaceful of communities, darkness can lurk beneath the surface. And it was a reminder of the importance of truth, justice, and the unwavering pursuit of the law. Detective Miller had done his job, and he had brought Sarah and her accomplice to justice. But he knew that the scars of their deception would linger in Willow Creek for a long time to come. Before Sarah confessed, when Detective Miller first showed her the video, her initial reaction was one of disbelief and denial. "That's not me," she insisted, her voice trembling. "That video has been altered. It's a fake." Detective Miller remained calm. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, we have verified the authenticity of the video. We know it's you. We also have evidence of your financial troubles and your gambling addiction. It's time to be honest with us." Sarah continued to deny it for a few more minutes, but her resistance was weakening. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming, and she knew that she couldn't keep up the charade any longer. Finally, she broke down in tears. Okay, she sobbed. "It's true. I staged the robbery." Detective Miller asked her to explain her actions, and she launched into a rambling account of her financial woes. She told him about the mounting debts, the overdue mortgage payments, and the looming threat of foreclosure. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I was desperate. I was afraid of losing everything." She explained that she had initially tried to sell the jewelry, but she couldn't find a buyer who was willing to pay what it was worth. She had also been reluctant to part with the jewelry because of its sentimental value. "Those pieces were my grandmother's," she said. "They meant the world to me. I couldn't just sell them off like that." She had then come up with the idea of staging a robbery and filing an insurance claim. She thought it would be a quick and easy way to get the money she needed without having to give up her precious jewelry. "I know it was wrong," she said. "But I didn't see any other way out. I thought I could get away with it. I thought I was smarter than everyone else." Detective Miller asked her about the security camera. "Why did you tell me it didn't work?" Sarah admitted that she had lied about the camera because she didn't want him to see the footage. She had hoped that he wouldn't bother to check it. "I panicked," she said. "I didn't think you would actually look at the camera footage. I thought I could fool you." Detective Miller shook his head in disappointment. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, "you underestimated us. We are trained to see through deception. We are dedicated to finding the truth, no matter how difficult it may be." Sarah hung her head in shame. She knew that she had made a terrible mistake, and she was prepared to face the consequences. As she sat in the interrogation room, awaiting her fate, Sarah couldn't help but wonder how her life had come to this. She had once been a respected member of the community, admired for her wealth and her social standing. Now, she was a criminal, facing the prospect of prison and the scorn of her neighbors. She had made a series of bad choices, driven by greed and desperation. And now, she was paying the price. Her story served as a stark reminder that even the most seemingly perfect lives can unravel, and that the consequences of our actions can be devastating. Following her confession, Sarah Jenkins was formally arrested and charged with insurance fraud, a serious felony that carried a potential prison sentence, and filing a false police report, a misdemeanor that could result in fines and community service. Emily, her accomplice, faced similar charges for her role in the scheme. The legal proceedings began swiftly. Sarah and Emily were arraigned before a judge, where they entered pleas of not guilty. Their attorneys argued for their release on bail, but the judge, citing the seriousness of the charges and the risk of flight, denied their request. They were remanded to the county jail to await trial. The prosecution, led by the district attorney, prepared a strong case against Sarah and Emily. They had the security footage, Sarah's confession, Emily's testimony, and the recovered jewelry. They were confident that they would be able to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Sarah and Emily's defense attorneys, on the other hand, faced an uphill battle. They tried to argue that Sarah had been driven to desperation by her financial problems and that Emily had been manipulated by Sarah. They also argued that the insurance company had not suffered any actual financial loss, since the jewelry had been recovered. But the evidence against Sarah and Emily was overwhelming, and their defense arguments were largely ineffective. After several weeks of legal wrangling, both women decided to enter into plea bargains with the prosecution. Sarah pleaded guilty to insurance fraud and filing a false police report. In exchange, the prosecution agreed to recommend a reduced prison sentence. Emily pleaded guilty to aiding and abetting insurance fraud. In exchange, the prosecution agreed to recommend probation and community service. The sentencing hearing was held a few weeks later. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and residents of Willow Creek who had been following the case closely. Sarah and Emily both addressed the court, expressing remorse for their actions and apologizing to the community for the harm they had caused. The judge, after considering the evidence, the arguments of counsel, and the statements of the defendants, imposed sentence. Sarah was sentenced to 2 years in state prison. Emily was sentenced to 5 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. The sentences were met with mixed reactions from the community. Some people felt that Sarah had gotten off too lightly, while others felt that she had been punished harshly enough. Some people felt that Emily should have received a more severe sentence, while others felt that she had been a victim of Sarah's manipulation. But regardless of their individual opinions, the residents of Willow Creek were united in their desire to put the case behind them and to move on with their lives. They had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of truth, justice, and community. And they were determined to rebuild their town and to restore their sense of trust and security. The legal proceedings, while painful and disruptive, had ultimately served to strengthen their resolve and to reaffirm their commitment to the values that had always defined their community. The case of Sarah Jenkins was a closed chapter, but its lessons would endure in Willow Creek for years to come. The dust settled in Willow Creek, but the echoes of Sarah Jenkins' deception lingered. The initial shock and disbelief slowly gave way to a more complex mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of betrayal. The neighbors who had once offered Sarah meals and flowers now whispered behind their hands, their trust irrevocably broken. The social gatherings that had once been filled with laughter and camaraderie were now tinged with suspicion and unease. People wondered if they truly knew their neighbors, if the smiles and friendly greetings were genuine, or if they were hiding something beneath the surface. The case also sparked a broader conversation about the pressures of modern life and the desperation that can drive people to make terrible choices. Many residents of Willow Creek, like Sarah, were struggling with financial difficulties, mounting debts, and the fear of losing everything. They wondered if Sarah's actions were a reflection of a deeper societal problem, a symptom of a system that placed too much emphasis on material wealth and success. The local church organized a series of town hall meetings to discuss these issues. Residents shared their stories of financial struggles, anxieties, and feelings of isolation. They talked about the importance of community support, empathy, and understanding. They pledged to be more vigilant in looking out for their neighbors, to offer help and support to those who were struggling, and to create a more compassionate and caring community. Emily, after completing her community service, tried to rebuild her life. It was a difficult process. Many people in Willow Creek ostracized her, viewing her as a co-conspirator in Sarah's crime. But Emily was determined to make amends for her mistakes. She volunteered at a local soup kitchen, helping to feed the homeless and the needy. She also spoke to teenagers about the dangers of peer pressure and the importance of making ethical choices. Sarah, after serving her prison sentence, returned to Willow Creek a changed woman. She was no longer the wealthy and admired socialite she had once been. She was a convicted felon, ostracized by her former friends and neighbors. She found work as a waitress at a local diner, earning barely enough to make ends meet. She lived a quiet and solitary life, avoiding contact with the people who had once been her closest friends. But Sarah was determined to rebuild her life as well. She attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, seeking help for her addiction. She also volunteered at a local animal shelter, finding solace and companionship in the company of animals. The story of Sarah Jenkins became a local legend in Willow Creek, a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed, desperation, and deception. But it was also a story of hope, a reminder that even the most broken lives can be rebuilt, and that even the most shattered communities can heal. The residents of Willow Creek learned a valuable lesson from the Sarah Jenkins case. They learned that appearances can be deceiving, that even the most seemingly perfect lives can hide deep-seated problems, and that trust is a precious commodity that must be earned and protected. They also learned about the importance of community, empathy, and understanding, and the power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. And so, the town of Willow Creek, forever changed by the events of the Sarah Jenkins case, moved forward, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The peace and tranquility that had once defined their community had been shattered, but it had been replaced by something even more valuable, a deeper understanding of human nature, a stronger commitment to community, and an unwavering belief in the power of truth and justice.